So just how do you pick the best M.2 SSD? Let me show you. Welcome back to the channel. So you're thinking about buying a brand new M.2 SSD, correct? Maybe it's a Samsung, maybe a Western Digital, maybe Silicon Power, maybe Crucial, maybe from a brand you've never even heard of before, Klevv or Klevv, I have no idea how to say that. Take a look at that one. Are they any good? So how do you know how it's going to perform? How is it going to compare to other drives that are out there? Is it going to thermal throttle? Well, today I'm going to show you how to gather a lot of good information on this and actually how to use the information. Okay, and just a quick disclaimer too, before I get into the video, of course, I'm not going to cover everything here. I'm going to miss some stuff. I already know that for all the people that will leave those comments. I'm just going to try to get you started. But what I can promise you is you're going to be a lot more knowledgeable at the end of the video than you are right now, for at least some people, right? And you're going to have some, information that you can use when you want to buy the next SSD that's out there. Plus, we're actually going to have some cool charts, thermal throttling charts, stuff like that. So sit back and relax. It's going to be a fun video. Please watch the whole thing because it means a lot to me and it's also going to hopefully help you. Okay, so where do we actually start? Well, we're going to start with a website called TechPowerUp.com. And I'll actually have links in the video description so you can actually go in there and get all this information later. But this site has so much valuable information, it's incredible. But what I need to do in this video is I'm actually going to show you guys exactly what pieces of this information you want to pull out and what's really valuable to you and to me before we make a purchase. And I'm going to show you how the whole site works and everything. But this site in general is one of the best sites I've ever seen out there. It tests everything. But there's some key information in here we're going to look at. And we're going to go through a whole bunch of examples from expensive drives to cheap drives and show you some of the differences. Let me just show you the site first, and we're going to come back here in a second. So here's one. I'm going to have both of these links I'll show you here. There's going to be two links I'm going to have in the video description. Here's one of them. You can go in and you can search for any drive in here. I'm just going to give you some examples in here. And you can click on for more information. But you can see on this other side over here, it's going to give you some basic information on this page. And DRAM here, it's going to tell you if this has DRAM or if it's DRAM-less. Now, a lot of people are going to, this is a huge argument here where a lot of people say you never want to buy a DRAM-less drive, all right? Well, there's some reasons why you might. I'm going to prove it to you today, actually, to tell you the truth. So that's one thing right there. And we're going to talk about what this is really quickly. This is not the focus of the video, but let's just talk about it for a second. Okay, right here from Google, it says DRAM SSDs are generally faster and offer better sustained performance than DRAM-less SSDs due to the presence of dedicated DRAM cache. DRAM is used to store mapping tables and tracks the location of data on the SSD, allowing for quicker access. That's really what you want to know. So usually when you have DRAM, they're a little bit more expensive. They have a little bit more terabyte written, they can actually last a little bit longer. But that's actually changing a lot, and there's some reasons for that. And we're going to get into that in a second as well. But I'm going to show you more examples that make this more, so there's not so much of an argument because it really depends on the specific drive. Okay, really quickly, you'll notice on DRAM-less drives, this one's DRAM-less, doesn't have any DRAM. A lot of these say 64 megabytes of HMB. What does that mean? See that there? What that actually means is that actually has something called host memory buffer. See here from Google? It's a technology that allows DRAM-less SSDs to leverage the system's RAM, random access memory, for caching and other operations instead of relying on DRAM. So it does have a way of combating this. And it's getting really good because they have really big caches. And I'll show you all this in a second. This is going to make a lot more sense. But I just wanted to kind of show you this website. And when you click on any of these drives, it's going to give you more information to begin with. And then also the next thing over here is this second page. I'm going to have a link in the description here where these are actually full reviews of almost all the drives you can search for. And there's a lot more key information in there as well. So without further ado, let's just get into it. We're going to start with some examples here to show you exactly what all this means. It's going to make more sense, trust me. Okay, we're going to just start with a very common drive, and I'm going to show you like 7 or 8 other ones with all these weird kind of statistics, which are really cool, trust me. But the first one we're going to start with is right here, the Samsung 980 Pro 1 terabyte version. The terabyte makes a difference, so if you had a 2 terabyte, make sure you select 2 terabyte. But this is the 1 terabyte, and this is a drive from a couple years ago, but everyone's bought this many years ago, so it's a very common drive. So on this page over here, we're going to scroll down to this performance right here, this performance field. Inside of here, it's going to say endurance here, 600 terabytes written. That means that you can write 600 terabytes to this drive before they think it will fail. Now, we've already seen that it could be double that. These are usually low numbers. They usually are very conservative, so don't worry about that so much, but that's an important number, your endurance of the drive there. They'll go up. If this is a 2 terabyte, it'll probably double that, so it really depends on the size of the drive as well. These are the numbers down here that we're actually really, kind of looking at here. So we want to look at this SLC cache, and this is going to be, and I explained this before, but that's actually going to be, so all these drives that you put in, let's say you had an external enclosure, like a Thunderbolt 4 enclosure, and I put this drive drive in there. You can see that the SLC cache is 114 gigabytes. That means you're going to probably see very, very fast speeds, like around, whatever it's potentially going to be able to do, up until about 100, whatever it is, 114 gigabytes transferred. And then you're going to see the speed of the drive dip all the way down because you ran out of the SLC cache. That's why the cache, the bigger the cache, the better in a lot of cases, because you're going to get longer sustained speeds. Now, I'm going to show you this with charts. It's going to make more sense, so stay with me. This other stuff down here, speed when a cache has been exhausted, is down here. This is another important one down here. You can see it. So that means actually after the cache runs out, it's going to go down to around 2200 megabytes per second. And believe it or not, that's a phenomenal number. A lot of these drives that we're going to see are going to go down to like 300 megabytes per second after the cache is gone. This one, since it's a quality drive by Samsung, it only goes down to 2000, and that's actually a good number. So we looked it up here. Now we're going to go over to this other one. Now you want to look. So once you look up your drive, and I'll have links to this in the description, then you want to go ahead and see if they did an actual review on it. And this one they did. So here it is right here. They did a review on the 980 Pro 1 terabyte right here. You get to this first screen. We want to scroll down. There's a drop down here. Click on this and then look for this right here, write intensive usage in SLC cache, that one right there. Click on that. It's going to bring this chart open. And sure and behold, look at this chart. So this one is able to do around 4,000 right here, somewhere in that range, right? But as soon as you hit the cache, remember we said the cache was 118 or something? Right here, this is the cache level down here, and right at 100 and something, it drops, just like I mentioned, but then it maintains the speed right around 2000 right here, all the way over here. So it goes up to around 2200. It doesn't drop all the way down here. It just drops after it runs out of that cache. Now you might say, well, geez, that's not even, it doesn't look like a good result. Well, it actually is, believe it or not. It's a small cache on a drive, but it's a good result, and I'm going to show you why. So if you scroll over here, let's just take a look. So here's the cache size here, and you can see that out of all these drives, it's hard to see, I know, in this picture, but the 980 Pro's got a small cache, right? There's a lot of drives down here. Larger is bigger. Some of these have way bigger caches. This one's got, 633 gigabytes of cache and all that stuff. This has only got 113 gigabytes. But since it sustains a really high number after it drops off cache, you can see in this other chart where higher is better, this Samsung 980 Pro, in kind of the age of the drives that were out at the time, ranked really high. It was the second fastest here when you actually read across the whole drive, because it would write the cache, drop, but it would not drop that low after that, all right? It would stay at a good almost 2,000 megabytes per second, and that's actually a really good result. You can see here. So this is how you tell if a drive is good or not. This is going to make more sense in a second. We're going to go to the second one over here. This next one's called a Crucial T500 here, 2 terabytes. We got the version here. You can see this in here. Take a look at it. So we're going to go down here again to performance. Don't worry about the terabytes written, but this is a 1200 terabytes written because it's 2 terabytes. And look at SLC cache here, 720 gigabytes. See it right here? That's a really high cache, right? But the cache folding speed, which is actually going to be the speed at which it has to transfer from SLC to TLC cache once it runs out of cache, is slow. It's only 500. So what are the results going to be with this one? Even though it's got this giant cache, almost, 7 times the size of the one we just talked about. So let's go to the next one over here. This is going to make more sense. So we went to the review. This actually had a review on it. So we're going to scroll down over here. We're going to click on this, and we're going to go down to let me see, SLC cache and write intensive usage right there. I'm going to click on that, and hopefully this thing will come up. Okay, you can see exactly what's happening here. So the drive starts at around 5,000 and it drops for some reason really quickly. But see, here's the cache over here. See it? Remember the cache was over 600, and here's 600 cache, 800. So the cache drops right where it said it was going to, right here. And then instead of maintaining 2,000 like the Samsung drive did, this goes all the way down, and it's kind of somewhere going up and down, somewhere and down here, but pretty slow. All right, and it doesn't so after 600 gigabytes, if you're going to most people aren't doing this, so this is the issue. If you're not doing more than 600, you're not going to get affected by this. You're always going to see this fast speed over here. But for people that want to transfer tons of data, it gets slow over here. So if we go down here, you can see this has got the second largest cache size out of all these drives here during its time of operation. But if you scroll down here, basically, if you want to fill the whole disk, though, look at it. It's not even near the top, even with that huge cache. It's somewhere in the middle down here, or kind of middle to lower area. It's 639 megabytes per second. Averaged, because think about it for a second, it goes off fast, but then it goes all the way down here, and you got to average all this time in. So to write the entire drive, it's actually not that fast. But initially, for the first 600 gigabytes, it's really fast, and that's something to know about. All right, so that's number one. I hope this is going to make more sense. It will when we get through all of them, so stay with me for a second. Now, one other thing I wanted to show you, we're back at this Crucial drive, the T500 here. Inside of this same thing, what you want to do is if you go in here, instead of clicking on SLC cache, there's something in here called thermal analysis and throttling, number 8 there. Now this is also important to see here. So all the drives are going to have charts just like this as well. And you can see here's the speed of the drive here. And it's going to say like here reads, it's going to say reads with the fan, no fan. And you can see with the fan, obviously the reads stay really solid. And then the temperatures go up to, they don't go up that high because it's got a fan. Without a fan, you can see that the temperature is going way up like this. That's the red, but it doesn't really affect these speeds here. So that's actually a good drive there. And if you go down here, this is the problem with writes. So writes, obviously it doesn't get affected that much. But you can see here, if you don't have a fan on this drive, and it's, sometimes you're going to run into some thermal throttling here. So what happens is as the temperature goes up here, here's your speeds, around 500 seconds to 600 seconds of sustained writing, you're going to get these dips here. See these little dips? And that basically means it's got to drop its temperature down, and it's going to slow down basically. It's going to try to drop its temperature and then come back up. It's slowly going to drop its temperature and then come back up to these speeds. So it's basically throttling a little bit like that. And you can tell on this chart, depending if you have fans or no fans. So this is another key part of this website that's really cool to look at. Okay, let's look at an older drive now that's going to have some issues. Take a look over here. This is the Corsair MP400 2 terabyte. You can still buy this drive even though it's older, but we're going to go down to performance. You can see 400 terabytes written only, but again, it's a smaller drive. Actually, what is it? It's 2 terabyte drive, so it doesn't. This is a little bit older though. Don't worry about that number. But down here you can see the SLC cache is 485. That's a big number. But look at the the speed when exhausted, 250. That means it's really slow. Remember the Samsung had like 2000 here, so that's going to tell us that there's going to be some issues with this drive. And let's just check out if that's true. So we're going to go back over here, like I mentioned, to the review of this drive, and I'll give you both these links. Then we're going to go, first we're going to go in here and we're going to go, the SLC cache. And just like we had mentioned before, look at this. So this actually starts off, and again, this is a slower drive because it's older, but this did very well up until that 400 cache limit, 400 and something, and then it just drops like a rock. And look how slow it is. This is 500 megabytes over here. So it's like what, 100 and 200 megabytes per second all the way after that. So once you hit the cache, this thing just falls off the face of the earth. So if you look at this chart over here, and while it's got the largest cache out of all these drives here, because it's obviously 485 gigabytes for the time, if you look over here where higher is better, so this is better down here, it's at the fourth lowest basically. If you wanted to copy the whole drive, it's only 258 megabytes per second, because obviously you have to average this fast speed with all this very, very slow speed, which only averages to like 285 megabytes per second. So this drive is great again at the beginning, but it drops off like a rock at the end, and it's not a good drive overall for that kind of stuff if you want to just do a lot of long-term backups on it. If you go into thermal throttling here, we're going to take a look at this. So, you can see here, this is going to be reads. Again, this is going to be reads. Let me see here, with a fan and without a fan, I believe. So with the fan and without a fan, they're very similar. It doesn't really affect the speed of anything. But take a look over here how crazy this one is. So basically, this is going to be your writes, and this is going to be, let me just see here. So this is with the fan. Both of them here are going to have some thermal throttling. You can see this throttling going on across the whole drive here. And actually, they're showing it with the fan and without a fan. And even when you have a fan here, the temperature only gets up to 50 C, but we're still seeing some throttling here. So on this drive, even if you can cool it correctly, it's still going to thermal throttle for some reason. So it's probably not the best drive to get, just based off that, putting 2 and 2 together. So I hope this is helping, like you kind of understand what's important here. You can kind of go through, I'm going to go through like 4 or 5 more drives here just to show you some differences here and, really what you want to kind of come up with here. Okay, let's go through a few more here. I got a TeamGroup drive now. A lot of people think these maybe are cheap drives, right? We'll take a look at this. So here it is right here. We're going to scroll down to the statistics down here. This is really important. It's got 1,300 terabyte written. That's endurance. That's really good. But look at this. This is crazy. So approximate speed here is, or cache, SLC cache is 626 gigabytes. That's crazy. So it's going to be fast up to 626, then drop. But even when it drops, it's going to drop to 3,000 here and eventually drop down to 500. That's folding speed. So that's still a pretty good number, all right? So if we go over here to this next chart, here it is right here. Here's down at the bottom. This is going to be the 600 cache here. You can see it level. So the speeds go like this, then they drop down to 3,000, just like it said. It goes in another, 200 gigabytes of written, then it will drop all the way down to 500. But still, up to about 800, you're going to be really moving here quickly. It's a really good drive if you're only moving about 800 gigabytes or less at once. And how many people actually do that? That's the question. So if you look over here, once again, you can see in here, it's 626 is the cache, really high in this list, one of the best. If you look over here, higher is better. Down here, TeamGroup, it's not that, it's kind of, in the middle, because obviously it does drop off here at the end here. Not like the Samsungs that just maintain a good 2000, it'll drop off. So you got to, kind of equate and average it all together. But again, if you're not doing things over 600, 800 gigabytes of transfer with this drive, it's going to be perfectly fine for you. Okay, this next one I want to talk about is the SLC cache. There's some drives that have very small ones, and people just kind of say it's not a good drive. But then it really matters how it performs after it runs out of cache. So here's one here from Silicon Power. It's called the UD90 1 terabyte, very common drive. Very inexpensive. So we're going to go down to performance. Let's see if we can find the performance. It's over here now. We can see in here, what is it? This isn't really showing you much information. Take a look. We're not seeing a lot of information in here. It just says it has SLC cache. Let's go ahead and check out the other chart though. Okay, you can see the chart over here. So this actually only has, it's less than 100 gigabytes of cache. Like I think it's around 80. You can see the hundreds right down here, and it's only going to be 80. So it's very fast, and then it drops off. But look at where it drops off to. It drops off to about 1,800 megabytes per second, all the way through the test, through the whole drive. And only at the very end does it kind of, crash here. Obviously down pretty low. But this and this combined give it a pretty good score overall. It's a very good drive, actually, believe it or not. So if you're going to be doing up to 80 gigabytes, it's going to be lightning fast. It's going to drop. But then if you do long throughput kind of copies, it's still going to be very solid for you. And it proves it right here. If you go to cache size, here's higher is better. It's way down here. It's actually 63 gigabytes. I'm sorry, 63 gigabytes right there. So it's really low. These other drives have massive cache. Look how much this is 10 times as much down here with this Kingston drive. But if we look over on some stay and writes, higher is better here. It's nowhere near the bottom. These are the bottom up here, even though this chart's reversed. If you go all the way down here, look where it is. This is the best down here, but it's right in here because it's able to maintain it at 1,168 megabytes per second. So overall, the averages are really good here because it's actually not dropping all the way down here like a lot of the drives do. And that's why you can't always judge a book by its cover. And then also for this drive, thermal throttling and stuff is not really an issue here. You can see here it is right here with the fan and basically without a fan. And you can see there's very little difference here. I mean, the temperature does go up, but the actual speed stays the same. And even over here, same basic thing here. So when you actually have writes, with a fan, you can see that the temperature stays lower. Without a fan, it goes up, but it's not really affecting the write of the drive. And that's really important. The blue lines are the writes. If this is dipping down and stuff, you see that there's thermal throttling. But with this drive, it's actually might be good for like an enclosure or something where you do long backups, because obviously you're not going to run into some thermal throttling issues. And you can see the temperature. If you can get one with a fan on it, one of those external drives, it's going to do pretty well here. So overall, I think this is a good drive for that. Remember I said don't judge a book by its cover? Remember we talked earlier about the drive nobody knew about? Here it is, Klevv or Klevv. Here's one by that company. It's called the C925, 2 terabytes. So I was looking at this one. Performance is really solid. 2,400 terabytes written. Look at this, pretty incredible. And then down here, this is the numbers that got me. 290 gigabyte cache here. But look at this. After, when the cache is exhausted, it still stays at 2,000 megabytes per second. And then even with the cache folding speed, 600. So these are all good numbers. So let's go over to the chart here and take a look over here. So we can see that it starts off fast until it hits its cache at 200 and something. Then it drops down, but it maintains a 2,000 megabyte per second speed all the way over here to what is it? Over 1,300 gigabytes written. And then it drops down, and for some reason it goes back up. Maybe it cools down or something. But long story short, there's just a small period here that's under 1,000. So that's going to mean it's pretty good. So if you look over here, here's the cache size. You can see it's not the highest. 290 is the cache here. But if you scroll down here, this is better up here. You can see that it's actually near the top. And look at down here, all the way down. There's other drives, Seagates and Western Digitals. It's doing better than all of them. It's a drive you've probably never heard of either. But it gives you kind of that analysis of how to look for things when we're looking for it. But let's take a look. I mean, are we actually going to see thermal throttling here as well? Okay, with thermal throttling on this drive, you can see here, these are going to be reads here, I believe, yes, and it says heat spreader and fan. You're not going to run into any issues here. It looks like everything's going fine here. Over here it says heat spreader and fan as well, so these are the writes here. But actually, if you go down here with no fan and stuff like that, you can see what happens. So here's the temperature. It goes way up to 80 degrees C, and then look at the drive. It's actually going to start thermal throttling down here. And the same thing here. This actually gets pretty hot, and this kind of thermal throttles a little bit, although this is kind of the speed that we expected, right, from the analysis on the other page. So this isn't really affecting it too much, not as much as the one over here. But this is what you want to look for. And you want to look for if you need a fan or no fan. And that's going to tell you if a lot of these things are needed. A lot of these drives have to go into a motherboard where there's a fan hitting it, or there's a cooling system on it inside of a motherboard like on a Windows PC. If you're using it on an external SSD, obviously it's not going to have the same kind of cooling and you're going to run into more thermal throttling. So you want to look for the drives that have very little thermal throttling when you use external drives, versus these type of things can be cooled a lot easier when you throw them into your Windows PC and you put a huge fan on them or something like that, or you have tons of fans in the case. It's going to help these out. Okay, this next one I actually talked about all the time. This is the Lexar NM790 2 terabyte. And I had someone tell me this is a junk drive, it's from China and stuff. But take a look at the numbers don't lie in here. So here's the drive, 2 terabytes. We're going to go down to performance. 280 cache right here, but look at this. Speed when cache is exhausted, 2500. That's a great number. Cache folding speed, 800. That's a great number as well. So that equates over here. And we're going to go into the Lexar. We're going to go down to the right caching. Let me actually get to that. So here we go. So we can see here, this is a little different, but the speed's going to stay here until it reaches the cache level. Then it's going to drop down, and like we said, 20-something hundred it's going to maintain at right all through here. Then down to about 800, and then it's going to jump back up. But this is actually a good profile because of this long, like what is it, 2500 megabytes per second in this range, all the way through here is going to be good, where the cheap drives all go all to the bottom and they actually just kind of bottom out here. We showed you a couple of those before. So while this doesn't have the largest cache, it's kind of near the top, but it's still only 280. If you go down here, it's actually performing really well. It averages about 1449 megabytes per second over the course of filling the entire drive up. And that's actually pretty high. I mean, all these other ones are below it. So you can see there, that's a pretty good profile as well. Also, this drive here with the Lexar, it's not going to have a ton of thermal throttling problems. It is going to get up to 60-something C here, 70 C, but it's not going to actually run into any thermal throttling as well. So that's another test on that drive to say, hey, that's a pretty good drive. Okay, 2 more, and then we're going to wrap this up. Now, if let's say you search for the drive, it's in here as far as the information, but there's no review on it. I can't get that chart that I just showed you. Some of the drives you can't get the chart. You can still use the information like I showed you. It still has the current information. I have the Samsung 990 EVO Plus 2 terabytes. I've showed this on my channel all the time. People say it's DRAM-less, right? It's not that good. Well, let me show you. Let's just go down to the numbers. Even though I don't have that chart, I can look under performance here, 1200 terabytes written. I can see that it's got a 226 gigabyte cache on the 2 terabyte version. But look at this, speed when exhausted, 1800, and folding speed, 1500. Those are incredible numbers, especially the folding speed. That means it's never going to get below that 1500 megabytes per second. So this drive in particular is DRAM-less, but it beats a lot of the DRAM, drives with the DRAM on it. And this is what I'm saying, this is definitely what I'm talking about. Let me actually see. So it's the host memory buffer that helps a little bit on this, but it's also going to just be the new technology and the cache and everything else and just the quality of the drive. And in that case of that Samsung I just showed you, the Samsung 990 EVO Plus, it beats a ton of drives with DRAM in it, and it's DRAM-less over the course of the whole drive. If you're actually copying it, it's actually a phenomenal drive. Now I don't have the chart to show you, but I can see those numbers. Once you start learning how to use the numbers, I know those are great numbers, and once you know what the numbers mean, you can actually use this for all the drives, even if they don't have the charts. Okay, now I finally wanted to wrap this up, but I want to show you one that's got a really big heating problem, and it's a good drive if you can cool it. That's the question. So this is not good for external SSDs. So here we go, TeamGroup GC Pro 2 terabyte drive. Really, it's called the GC Pro 2 terabytes, all right? So I went to the initial page, and it shows, here's the performance, good terabytes written, but it's 620 gigabyte cache. That's really good, right? Speed when exhausted, 2000. Folding speed, 1500, all great numbers in there. This one's got the chart. It's got kind of the review in here. So let's go ahead and we'll pull up the chart there. Let me actually get in there, see if I can find it in here. Sorry about this. All right, here it is. So we're looking at the chart here, and look at it. It starts off, 7 to 8,000 megabytes per second, even goes up a little bit, hits its cache at 600. Here's the cache down here, drops down. Still, the folding speeds and everything else, and even, the initial cache and then the initial speed after cache and the folding speed are very close. So this actually maintains around 2,000 megabytes per second. So if you go down here, you're going to see that the cache is really high, and if you go down here, it's going to be at the very top. Look at this. Fill whole disk, this is going to be one of the fastest at 2248 megabytes per second. One of the fastest on the entire list here. Look at this, all the way down. So it's a great drive, right? Well, only if you can cool it correctly. Let's take a look at the thermals. Okay, so we got some issues here. So this is going to be, what is this, reads and writes here. This is going to be with a heat spreader and fan, actually. This is going to be heat spreader and fan, so the reads and writes. But take a look at the speed here. It's, obviously, as you use the drive more, these are going to be seconds down here. So this is 100 seconds, 200 seconds, 300 seconds, 400 seconds. As you start using the drive more, the drive heats up, which is the red line, right? And then the blue line actually just goes straight down like this. So keeping this drive cool, whether it's reading writes, is super important as it actually gets hotter. And if you take a look down here, let me just see here. This is going to be a small thermal heat sink here. It says a thermal, what is it? Thermalright small heat sink. It gets a little bit better. You can see how it's prolonging right here and then slowly going down as it heats up. And over here, same thing, reads and writes. It's going to be doing the same thing. But if you go all the way down here and you get a big Thermalright heat sink, a giant heat sink on this thing, take a look. The actual sustained speeds of over 8,000 go all the way until the end. Same thing here. They go all the way and then just start dropping off at the bottom on the writes. So if you can cool it correctly with this, and let me just show you what this means. Here's like a Thermalright. This is a heat sink for an SSD. Take a look at this. So if you can actually cool it with something like this, it's only 14 bucks, right? You're actually going to be able to get speeds that are actually off the charts. But if you can't cool it like an external SSD enclosure, look at these. They just drop like rocks in here. Every single example pretty much is going to just drop like a rock. So if you have this with just dead, no air moving around it and stuff like that, this is a terrible drive to get. But if you can put that actual, fan on it and have some type of a cooling system built into it, like on a Windows PC, this is a phenomenal drive. It's very, very fast, right? It's a Gen 4, Gen 5 drive. But overall, you just need to cool it. And this is going to be what you have to look at in order to prove what drive to get. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up. It's a lot of information to take in. Eventually, I might show you what are the best drives overall, just go in and do the research myself. But the one thing to take away from this is you need to go in and look at the data, because whether you're using it as an external drive, using it in an internal PC where you can cool it, it matters, right? If the cache is X amount, it may be only a very small cache, but as long as that drop-off cache speed is very high, if you're going to be doing a lot of backups over, like, let's say a terabyte of backups every couple days, it's going to still maintain its speed pretty well, and it's going to finish faster than the one with the bigger cache. So that makes a difference. I mean, things like this all make a difference on what you're going to buy here. And then at the end of the day, if you're only going to be doing up to 50 gigabytes at all, just that's as much as you're ever going to transfer, then just get the cheapest drive with the smallest cache, because it doesn't matter. Even if the speed drops off, you're never going to go past the 50 gigabytes, right, of data transfer. So you're never going to reach that speed where it drops off, and you'll never see that in an external drive. So all this matters when you're buying it, and you have to kind of look at all the data. And that's kind of what I wanted to show you today is, when you want to go look for that Klevv drive out there you see for a super sale on Amazon, and it's on sale, look at that. And it wasn't a bad drive, right? And then you can go ahead and say, geez, at least I did my research and I can trust it. So anyways, we'll wrap this up. I was going on forever there. I hope this makes a little bit of sense. We will talk to you in the next one. Peace.